Right, welcome back. This is part 2 of the Flushing Trough tutorial. Now, if you've seen the first part of the tutorial, you would have noticed that I talked about the Flushing Trough cistern, which is pretty much the long cistern in a drawing that I've done on Microsoft Paint. It's quite a basic drawing of mine, but it's basically a little attempt I thought about having a basic draw of the trough cistern and probably a few other cisterns I'll try and draw at some point. Now, in the last part, we basically talked about the trough, how it kind of works, and what's basically expected of a flushing trough. And we managed to look at my little trough view that I'd done the other day over in Plymouth. Now, here we've got another picture I found on Flickr. It's another flushing trough. Supposedly, this one used to be somewhere in Hastings, but apparently it's not there anymore, which is a bit of a disappointment. But it looks like a very stereotypical flushing trough. Interesting colour schemes there behind it. And as you can see, the chain comes through the cistern. So look closely. It don't go over the back, it goes through the cistern. So we've already looked at flushing troughs where there's a slightly different arrangement. Sometimes they go over the front, the chains I mean go over the front, sometimes they go over the back, and now we've got one that goes through the cistern. So I've often speculated that there might have been more than one company who made them, and there are a lot of different models, so different lengths per width of the cubicle and per number of WCs available. And we've already worked out there was pretty much a twisted pipe version where the timer box would be located in one corner or the other, and they even adapted it to be concealed. Okay, so this is a slightly different one to ones I've seen before. I have seen this one once, quite a long time ago, and it was at a school in Poole. Right, now yesterday you might have worked out or noticed that I was talking about the school I used to go to, and I'll try and find it here. Yesterday's discussion, little aerial view of the school I went to, where I talked about the background of the toilets, where I suspected they had flushing troughs from when they opened up until the 90s, and in the girls very recently. Have a very basic look at it. So I talked about yesterday, I talked about the background of the premises, and quite interestingly, this school, which opened in 1938, had a slightly younger twin, an almost identical twin, that opened a few months afterwards in 1939. And there we go. This is another school in Poole called Poole High School. It opened in 1939, and it used an almost identical plan, not exactly identical. So this is looking on Google Earth. You can see the shape of it. It's rectangular. Originally it's a separate boys and girls schools, boys this side, girls the other, and it would have opened with the 11 to 14 age range, extended to 15 about 1947, and then it was 16 compulsory from 1972 when they built this building underneath. If we go up on the older imagery, this building was built in front of it afterwards. So this is when it was different to the school I went to. The extensions are a different age. The school I went to would have had a temporary wooden building that only lasted around 20 odd years, yet this one had a permanent building. Now these buildings were built in the 70s when they raised the leaving age, and they called them Rosler blocks. So Rosler was raising of standard leaving age. So every school had to be adapted to provide for the extra year, which was what we now call year 11. They called it fifth form at the time. And there was the original school. Now in 1974, all secondary schools in Poole changed their age range from 11 to 16 to 12 to 16. And this school, as well as the school I went to, became a mixed school after 1974. And there's the canteen building, which I believe my school had a canteen like that a long time ago before I went there, and various extensions and so on. Now I went inside here quite a few years ago, back in 2003, just to get inside. It was like a sixth form open day. I've mentioned this, you'll find out in a bit. I've gone round and done a little bit of filming the outside. I mentioned that I went to this open day, not with the intention of going to their sixth form obviously, but I went there to check out the premises, and I got to see their original boys' toilets, which we go up here, zoom in, would have been located in this section. Now it follows a very similar plan. So yesterday with the school I went to, I mentioned that the boys' toilets arrangement would have been located in somewhere along here, this section. There's a room with wash basins, a room with WCs, and a room with urinals. Okay, and they're located to the west of the building, whereas the Poole High School's arrangement was located northwards. But they probably, well, they would have certainly had a room for wash basins, a room for WCs, and a room for urinals. Now, when I visited during the day, obviously being a mixed school, this room here was converted into the girls' toilets probably since the 70s to provide girls' toilets for that side of the school. So that meant there was no wash basins in here. Now, in these toilets I saw, they had a few little wash basins which looked like 70s era wash basins, probably quite lightly gunned between the passages between the WCs to the urinal. And the urinal was a stainless steel with white cisterns. That was quite clearly put in the 70s, so they obviously refurbished this as girls' toilets around 1974, and the urinals. And as for WCs, there were 3 WCs along this wall, and there were 7 along this wall, following a very almost identical layout to how my school's toilets were arranged. And the cistern was a flushing trough, so they had flushing troughs in there, and quite interestingly, flushing trough itself was that one, where the chain went through the cistern. Okay, so I'd never seen a trough like that before, but I was quite envious of them. The toilet walls were painted blue, but they had a few cracks in their paintwork, and it revealed they would have had brown tiles, exactly the same as the school I went to. Although, if you saw the last video, I mentioned that I only actually saw them from a window, so it's quite a long story, but obviously they would have followed an almost identical floor plan. Even fixtures like toilets would have been very much the same. So I never got to see the original boys' toilets myself in my school, only from a distance. The closest I actually got to seeing them was in the twin school on the other side of Poole. So Poole High School was originally Henry Harbin's school until I think about 1993 or 94. And it would have had a very similar feel in the building, but as a school it was very different. It was much more advanced. It kind of had a special status where they could allow several students into a higher stream, a bit like a grammar school within a main school, if you know what I mean. So they had more academically able students there. It was a popular school. Parents moved to the catchment area to get their kids into the school. It didn't have the reputation my school had. My school had quite a bad reputation and was considered quite a rough school. And quite, well, I wouldn't say it's as bad as they made it out to be, but it was known as the most feared school in Poole, whereas Poole High was kind of the up-and-coming school. It was more advanced. So they were kind of a few steps above us socially in their school league tables, but their toilet provision was always quite good. And over here, you've got the railway crossing, well, the railway line. There's a little footbridge, and you can see the side. Now I could work out where the toilets were from the side, and you can walk around this footpath. This building here is the sports park, built in the 70s onto the Rosler block, and changing rooms, I presume, are down here. You can see through these bushes, which are now overgrown a bit, you could see through a window they had a flushing trough in the changing rooms. Okay, now I know quite a few people who've gone to this school, and this is how it's grown since 2000. I think they've built even more bits since then actually. So 2000 and that's how it looked in 2007 from above. But yeah, I know a few people went to this school, and one girl I had on my Facebook profile, there's a picture of her and her friends when they were leaving school in the girls' toilets. Now I don't know why girls do this, but they always take pictures of themselves in toilets. They do it in nightclubs and all sorts of places, but they do it at school as well. And I've seen on some older Friends Reunited photos, so when I was Friends Reunited once, no point because I'm not going to a reunion just yet, but I've actually seen a lot of old photos of girls taken inside their school toilets. Okay, but this girl I know, there's a photo of her and her friends in girls' toilets somewhere in the school, and they had, well, there was a flushing trough in the background. Now obviously it'd be, well, probably one of these buildings. I can't get the picture up because, well, I don't really know her too well. I don't think she'd be happy with somebody putting pictures of her and her friends up, but They still had a Flushing Trough in the school in 2010, I think. So they had quite a lot of variety of high levels there, mainly Flushing Troughs. But the Flushing Trough in the boys section this side had one where the chain went through the middle, i.e. this one, whereas the Flushing Trough, I believe, in the buildings down here, the chain would go through the back. So this obviously meant the Flushing Troughs here would be 2 years older than the one up in the old building. That's how I worked out. And obviously this building was built in 1972. It would have still been separate boys and girls schools then at the time. As you can see by the layout of the building, one by the boys' side and one by the girls' side. I presume that's how it was. In 1974 the school became completely mixed. They had to adapt these as girls' toilets and thus refurbished the boys. They had a Flushing Trough in the boys, and they went for the slightly different one and went for that one. This is just how I've guessed it, but they probably had a Flushing Trough in the boys' toilets before that anyway, so it's a replacement one. So if they had an original Flushing Trough in their original boys' toilets, then they probably had one in my own school. This is just stuff I've worked out, but I managed to get a little footage walking around the sides to give a little bit of idea of what the premises look like, and a few other places as well I've been trying as well in Poole, which I'll be explaining to add to the discussion. Right, so that was just a part of a little brief there of walking around the premises. Being a Sunday, I managed to get away with it a little bit. So just go back and look very quickly. This would be the side of the boys' toilets around here. So as you can see, the windows have been replaced, but you can see the design of the building. It's very typical 1930s. The brickwork is very typical of the 30s, the flat roof. So very almost identical to how it would have been in my school originally, and pretty much a lot of schools built in the 30s at the time. Well, I'll turn the volume down a little bit. So that's probably the urinal section in there. And if you look round the back, you can't see inside. I'll just go back slightly, very slightly. So hold on, I've ruined it now, haven't I? Just go back there. You can see there's a little doorway. So that would have originally been the doorway that took you right into the boys' toilets around the back. Quite amusingly, they've got no smoking signs. I'm very sure for decades, if students were going to have a smoke, it was usually in these little doorway places. This building built in the back here looks like it's built in the 60s. I think it's their workshops actually. And then we move on to the next bit. We're looking at the side. This would be the eastward side, what would have one time been the girls' school. Originally they would have had a normal science and domestic science in here. Well, I presume they did. But this windows, these are exactly the same as the ones we had in my school. They've still got them at the Poole High School. So it's walking through. So again, very 1930s modernist building, going under a modern extension. And there we've got, I presume, a science room. We've got a little fan up in there. And the building's covered in what looks like ivy. It looks very green. It looks quite nice actually. The school I went to was a little bit more greyer, a bit more tarmacked. And that'd be another 1960s extension, and then it goes on to the next bit. So it's quite an interesting site. I've often found it quite interesting how there were two schools in Poole which were very similar originally, but they changed and went down different routes in their life. So if you lived in one area, one school was significantly stronger than the other. So I'll carry on with the rest of the discussion and we'll have a look at a few other things. I've got a few more tours of the premises which you'll see in a second, and then I'll be looking at a few other types of flushing troughs that other users have filmed, which would be quite good to showcase a few other people's interesting work as well. Right, the place we're looking at is the side of Poole High School in Poole. This school was the twin of the school I went to, opened April 1939 I think. Well, the school I went to opened in, well, it said October 1938, it probably opened a bit earlier. Walking through a public footpath, we've got the railway to my left and a bridge. So we walk up the bridge, hopefully no one's up there. We can have a look over onto the site. It's Sunday today, so they're having a look over. Very similar architecture, almost identical to the school I went to. It would be a separate boys and girls school. And at the end of my finger, that would be the original boys' toilets. Quite a few years ago, I used to see a high level overflow by that fan just at the end of my finger, but it's gone now, the windows are replaced. I know some do in the school here. I actually chatted with him for a bit, and he said they actually modernised the toilets in that building. The caretaker's house is also identical to the one we used to have in my school as well. Now I've actually been inside there quite a few years ago. It's but sort of like an open day for the sixth form. I went down, I wasn't going to go to their sixth form, but because I knew the school was identical, I thought it'd be worth to check out the premises, and I have seen the inside of those toilets. And this is back in 2003, and they had 10 WCs in there, 3 on one wall, 7 on the other. They were fed by a flushing trough. So I'll explain a bit more like that when I get back in. But yeah, considering the school was using the same plan as the school I went to, going into the boys' toilets in that school, the school up there, that was basically the closest to going into the original boys' toilets in my own school, because it had very much the same dimensions, everything, same height of the ceiling, and it had the same number of WCs that my school would have originally had. And the urinals were obviously at the back, which was a stainless steel, but yeah, it's all been modernised now. You can see a few bushes here at one time. I'll talk again in a minute. Yeah, sorry about that, to hang up there, somebody's walking up, but yeah, those bushes there, they weren't as well developed a few years ago. The building to the side, that used to be the sports block, you could see where the changing rooms would have been. I could see through a window from the distance, I could see a flushing trough with the overflow. I don't think it's there anymore, in fact they modernised it, so I found online. There might be another flushing trough in that building in front of the school. Obviously I'll explain a bit more when I get back home. The side we're walking past is Poole Stadium, home of Speedway and Greyhounds. Football don't play there. This footpath I believe was left open, and in the distance you might be able to work out another very curious looking building. It belongs to the stadium, not the school. So the school's to our left, the stadium to our right. These toilets, well, this building's toilets, and they're disused, unfortunately. They have got high levels in the stadium. I filmed them twice, had to do a reshoot last year. But yeah, I think this was the stadium's grounds at one time. Really disappointed they closed them off. So yeah, they've been really good to go in at one time. So that's like a little bonus of the walking around here. But yeah, I don't think they've been open for a couple of years actually. But yeah, there are still high levels in the stadium. Basically in Poole at the minute, so carrying on with the discussion about the Flushing Trough. There's a few other places I wouldn't mind going in, but they're concealed. That's something else I'm going to be talking about in today's discussion. Building ahead, it's a really modern looking building. That's the police and fire station building. The old fire station on the site was built in the 30s. I saw through an open window there the Shires in there, all gone now. And when we get to the end of this road, turn right back in the Poole, and I'll try one of my next locations to add to the discussion. Okay, so that was just another little side tour there, obviously going over the same things a few times, basically repeat myself a little bit. Obviously I actually filmed this earlier today, but yeah, so basically just describing what the premises are like and how similar they are and what their provision of Flushing Troughs would have been. So if I'd lived in a different area of Poole and gone to that school instead of the school I went to, I'd have had access to at least 3 sets of toilets with Flushing Troughs, whereas the school I went to, I just started at the wrong time. There was no Flushing Troughs available to male students. If I'd gone to my school a few years earlier, I'd have probably had access to at least 2. So I always feel like I'm missing out on the good stuff, but I do find good stuff eventually. Right, okay, so as we mentioned, they had this type of Flushing Trough, which I have seen but never filmed myself. Had I had a video camera back then and people were uploading videos, then I wouldn't have hesitated one bit. But luckily a few other users have found quite a few interesting videos, so I'm not the only person who's found a Flushing Trough before. There's quite a few who found them before me, and hopefully others will continue to find them. So we're going to have a little look at other YouTube videos, and here we've got one here which was filmed by Dauntless486, and this was a Flushing Trough found in the Norfolk Showgrounds. It's uploaded last June, so almost a year ago, and this is Norfolk Showgrounds, so I think it's a county fair they have once a year. I'm not exactly sure what they do there, but they have quite an interesting set of toilets, and they consist of quite a few Flushing Troughs, and as you can see, the one found here, the chain goes through the middle. So it's pretty much the same type of Flushing Trough. It's painted in quite a dark blue, which is quite a nice colour. Obviously my old favourite Portman Ravine was painted blue, when usually they're painted white, but as I did mention in the last one, they can't be any colour, so I do like the colour of that. It's quite a nice looking trough, very nice find there. It's got a Shire's Superline pan. Yeah, I found quite a few of them that day, so there's a turn the volume down slightly. I've got a nice old pool for it as well. This one I think had a decent flush. So yeah, very standard Flushing Trough there. And I think how this one would have worked is pretty much exactly the same as any other Flushing Trough, only, well, the timer box would be the same, but I think instead of the lever going out the back, it goes out the side. And I think what there'd be in the middle, there'd be like a pipe that goes up through the trough, and the pipe will be higher than any other watermark within the trough, and even higher than the overflow. So say it was to overflow, water would go out the overflow pipe, but not over this pipe, and the chain would drop down through this pipe and go in the middle. So I don't know if there was advantage over it, but I remember my old favourite at Portman Ravine, if you could flush it, sometimes water would splash over the top. So maybe they worked out at some point that some Flushing Troughs the water maybe does splash out, perhaps, I don't know, but it looks really tidy. It's quite a nice trough, so hopefully I'll see one of them at some point to film one for them myself. But it's pretty much the same make as the others, where the chain goes over the back, and it could probably be from the 70s perhaps, maybe a slightly later design, but then again I've seen others with the 70s where the chain goes over the back, so there isn't really any rule which one's better than the other. They all seem to work the same way, but with quite a few slight differences sometimes. Right, and this is another one of Dauntless's videos. This is also from Norfolk Showgrounds, again a Flushing Trough, but this time chain goes over the front. So very much the same type of trough. As you see this one, it doesn't appear to be painted. This is basically the natural colour. It's probably made of steel, some type of steel, not exactly stainless steel, so you can paint it, and therefore luckily it can avoid that horrendous stainless steel reputation. But it pretty much works exactly the same as the other one. The chain goes over the front, but it's almost in the middle, so it goes right into the timer box. So it's pretty much would work exactly the same as any others, but I've noticed a few slight things. With any sort of Flushing Trough, if I turn down the volume slightly, obviously the pipe would go away up from the WC pan. quick look through it. The pipe would go up through the pan and then it would curve slightly to go right into the middle, directly into the timer box. Okay, now this is something I've noticed in any sort of cistern. Usually the pipe never goes directly up, it always curves slightly to go into the middle underneath, almost in the middle but closer to the wall. Now I've noticed if this trough was to be turned around and the chain was to go around the back, you basically switch the whole thing around, so the pipe would be up in this end, so the pipe will have to curve a bit more. So in a way this isn't actually a trough that was simply put in the wrong way round, it was intended to be this way round, which is where things get a bit interesting. And having a look at the picture here, you can see the pipe goes up, curves slightly underneath. So if this was to be one where the chain goes over the back, you'll have to have a little space behind it, but the pipe will always drop into the same place eventually. So again, there were some very slight differences. And what we're doing, going back into here, this one here, you see, this could very well also be used for perhaps a concealed flushing trough. Now I've mentioned obviously flushing troughs can be concealed before. I've only ever seen two concealed ones, and I have mentioned them in my last discussion where I talked about the concealed arrangement. So there were flushing troughs concealed, there are flushing troughs concealed, and I believe a majority of them are concealed, and they possibly use this model here. Because if you think about it, say this was in a duct built hidden out of view in the passageway behind the toilets, the way it would work is the WC pan would be on the usual side, then the pipe would go through the wall up here and it would curve slightly in, and so on. The chain will obviously drop down and the handle will come through the wall to be attached to a chain. Okay, now if we was to go through and use perhaps the flushing trough where the chain goes over the back, to conceal it you'll have to turn the whole thing around. Okay, so what we'll do now, we'll go and have a look at some of my videos, and where is it, the one from the other day. We'll flick through. Actually, this one's probably not a brilliant one. I'll tell you what, I'll go and find my... The reason why I'm not using this one is because the pipes are boxed in, so I can't really... I'll go on my video manager, scroll through all my videos. As you see, I've got quite a lot of interesting videos. And have a look at the one from my old school, which I filmed last year. And we'll have a look very quickly. Filmed so much, filmed quite a lot. Right, and here's my old school special. Scan through, find the what we was looking at yesterday. We'll get it back in a second, just wait for the video to move forward slightly. And there it is, the flushing trough where the chain goes over the back. In this case the pipe goes up the wall, it curves slightly in. In this case the pipe drops directly into the back, almost like the chain goes directly over the back. Now if you was to conceal this and turn this one around, obviously the chain to go over would have to go the other way around, as the way that would work is obviously the pipe, say this was in a duct, you would have to turn it around, you'd have the pipe going up the wall, you'd have to turn the whole thing around. In that case the whole to go into the timer box would be down here. So they actually made it so there are several different arrangements of where the positioning could be placed basically. Right, and this is a very basic description which I've just drawn literally a few seconds ago. I know it doesn't look very tidy, but that's basically kind of what a concealed one would look like. Now there's two types of arrangements I've seen. One's what I call the mechanical look using lead bars, and the other is what I call the chained effect, literally using chains. I've mentioned this a couple of times before, so just a quick brief. If this was say inside the duct and you were looking at the wall, you've got the pipes coming from the WCs going directly up into the trough, and say this is one that serves free, and the handle will be the other side. The handle will go through up there and it will go up to this lead bar device, which will then connect to something that will go right into the timer box inside. Now say you was to look at it from the side. There's the WC pan just as usual on the visible side, and here's the duct. The pipe would go directly through, go up the wall, then curve slightly in and into the trough, and as you can see the handle will come from this side, go through the wall, connecting to one lead bar, which will then connect up to a couple of other bars. Now I'm not exactly sure how it would look, but I believe when you pull the handle down, you pull this long lead bar down, and this is attached to another smaller bar located up this end. You pull that up, that's connected to another bar that would then stretch going along this way, it would stretch along that way, and that would be attached to a very small chain which would be the pulley device, which will then pull up the siphon, starting the siphonic action. Water's released inside the timer box only, and then of course the trough would work exactly the same as any other one would. Now whereas if it was not concealed, it would look a bit like this. This is basically, well, it's supposed to be a WC pan. Pipe would go up on the wall, and it would curve in slightly. The pipe would curve in slightly directly to the back of the trough, and of course the chain would come out the back with a little bit of a space between the trough and the wall for the chain to come back down. So these are some of the very basic varieties. Now if it was to use the effect not using the lead bars and just use the chains, the handle, well, the lever will just come out the back, changer ups down, attached directly to the handle. So these are quite a few ways to see what the flushing trough would look like concealed. I wouldn't mind filming one concealed, but it's almost impossible to get inside of them. So if this one was concealed, like I said, you'd have to turn the whole thing around in order for there to be a chain basically. So they have, in a way, they'd design it so that, say this was the duct, this trough would be directly at the back of the wall, the pipe would go up and curve slightly inside, and then the chain would come over the front, and then it'd be attached to, well, the handle basically. Or if they use the lead bar effect, they would have to obviously have the lead bars coming up attached to several other lead bars and so on. So it's quite complicated to work out. It's taken me quite a while to work it out, but there were quite a few different designs quite clearly. Some intended to be concealed, but they could still be used in the exposed setting, and these ones here which you could switch it around and make it concealed, but then of course if you turn the whole thing around, the pipe would then have to curve up entirely, if you know what I mean. So there were quite a few different designs. There are twisted pipe versions, and obviously there are different widths per WC served, as well as for the partition wall. So we'll have another look at a few other pictures I found as well. And we've got this one here as well. Now this is a photo uploaded by somebody called Sandra Keaton, who's got quite a few interesting pictures actually. I stumbled across this picture by accident. I was actually looking for Brighton train station toilets. They've closed quite a long time ago. They've got modern ones, but there's some interesting ones below the station, and she's got some photos of those ones. I'll get the camera back quickly. And she also had these. Now these ones are actually identified, well, it describes them as being the Trent Bridge toilets, which so happen to be in Nottingham. And as you can see, it's got some very nice traditional sets of tiles there. Nice old pan there, possibly. And of course it's a flushing trough. And it, obviously, pipe goes up, curves slightly, goes inside, space around the back. You can almost see the siphon on top, but notice here the chain is actually not quite so close to the pipe, so it's almost slightly differently arranged. I'm not quite sure how that would work exactly, but I'm wondering, is this a wider one, i.e. wider as in the width requires to be wider? Because this setting is clearly a Victorian setting, so they obviously added a trough in later. I very much doubt the Victorians had flushing troughs. In fact, I'm very certain they didn't. So they obviously put one in, but where the wall was slightly wider, they had to have a wider trough, not per WC served, but for the width of the partition wall. Now I'd like to visit that one myself, but there we are. There's the premises on Google Street View, and as you can see, they've closed, which is a shame because these have got really nice Victorian features, urinals, wash basins, and they've completely closed this nice building down. They haven't demolished it. Maybe they want to reopen it, but they probably won't. And over here, just to add insult to the injury, the replacement, just one, that's all they got, one unisex. It's probably automated, and well, it's not an ugly building actually. It could be quite good to be a 24-hour accessible facility, but they've closed these ones down. So that's why I've not made any formal plans to go to Nottingham, because I think they'd be quite good to visit if they've got them in the men's. But yeah, they definitely had a Flushing Trough in the ladies. And of course in that one the chain wasn't quite so close to the pipe. So again, slightly different model than that one. Right, and here's another video by Dauntless486. And this one's actually in the Suffolk showgrounds, I think, which is classed as Trinity Park. Quite interesting how both Norfolk and Suffolk have them in their ceremonial grounds, which they're both in East Anglia, which is, well, it's a region, it's not officially a county, they're separate counties, but they have quite a few variety of Flushing Troughs. Now this one's an Armitage ware pan, fed by a Flushing Trough, and as you can see, it's a Flushing Trough quite clearly, but this one's slightly different. I've noticed a few of the differences. Slightly curved edges, which are quite, well, looks just as good. And here, as you can see, there is a chain that goes over the back, but the lever is actually diagonal, which looks good. Doesn't look bad at all actually, it still works the same, and I think the space behind the wall might be slightly larger actually. Now you can see the other one from the next WC. And this one also appeared to have a lid onto it, which was quite interesting. It was quite different. Got a decent flush there. The Armitage wear pans are good as well actually. And yeah, you can, oh, I'll go back quickly. Go back, and as you can see, it's got a lid, so it's a slightly different make. Again, another company was making them, and I've not actually seen one of this make myself, but it's quite good to see a slightly different version. So again, you see how many people were making them, and this material could very well be cast iron actually, which is quite a nice effect. So some of them were made in steel, and others were made of cast iron, and possibly some were made of plastic as well. Right, and this is the other one from Trinity Park in the ladies apparently. As you can see, it's the same Flushing Trough again, but this time the chain goes over the front. It's almost got a little holder as well for the little lever there, which looks quite a good effect. So it pretty much would work the same as the other one. Decent flush again, they always get decent flushes. So that's quite a nice one. Hold on, we'll look at it again. Apparently this one didn't have a lid, but possibly did originally. If you look, the pipe goes up the wall, curves in slightly, but this time, I wonder if this time you see there would be no space at the back for the chain to come down. So again, whoever made this version, they still made two, some for the chain to go over the front, some for the chain to go around the back. Doesn't matter, it still works the same, but this one perhaps could be better for a concealed setting. So again, you see, if they did use these ones to be concealed, and you've got the lever coming out slightly to the side, the chain drops down, the handle's not going to be quite as close to the pipe at all, so you probably get concealed Flushing Troughs where the handle's not in the middle, which is something quite often people have noticed with a lot of concealed toilets. Basically, if the handle's in the middle, it's usually suspected there's a Flushing Trough concealed. Not necessarily, but makes a lot of sense. Try and have a look at one of mine again quickly. This is another of my videos. As you see, handles in the middle. This is camphor teeth and Poole, by the way. Yeah, the handle's directly in the middle, so again, it's possibly a concealed Flushing Trough. Otherwise, it'd just be a twisted pipe with maybe a Shires, but I don't think that'd be necessary if you're going to conceal it. So again, you see, you could have a concealed Flushing Trough where the arrangement's slightly different. The handle's not going to be quite so close to the middle. And also, if the WC, if the partition walls are wider, they could have a thinner Flushing Trough, and they might need to twist the pipe in order to get it to work. That's something else I've worked out. So a lot of possibilities. Something I find quite interesting with a lot of these flushing troughs is they always make you ask questions. You know, they're clever cisterns, and that's what I like about them. There's always a slight difference to each one. It's almost like everyone's got personality. So every set of public toilets has its own personality, but when you've got a flushing trough in the premises, well, it adds a lot more life to the settings. So even if they're concealed, you still get quite a lot of interest out of them. Right, this video here is from some guy from Bristol, and this is what's known locally as the Bear Pit in Bristol. It's called St James Barton Roundabout, and a very interesting set of concealed toilets here, which we'll let it play on for a bit. Got, by looks of things, smooth walls, slightly vandalised, and there's the handle, which is somewhat in the middle, a little bit broken, I think. And it'd be quite close to the middle, so again this is possibly a concealed flushing trough. So we'll have a little play on for this one. I think that's an Armitage Shanks, that one. See what the flush is like. Yeah, it's a very powerful flush, so quite obviously it's a high level. Don't know up into the camera there. So yeah, that's possibly another concealed flush and trough arrangement. However, as we see in one of my videos, if we can get it up, you'll notice in this one, which I mentioned before in my concealed discussion, the handle's pretty much directly in the corner, not in the middle. And obviously I worked out this is possibly a Shire's. So if it's a concealed flush and trough, obviously the handle would be much closer to the middle of the pipe. So these are again ideas to see if it's a concealed flush and trough or not. But obviously another big giveaway is if you can flush it on, well, consecutive occasions, which doesn't happen all the time, but if you can keep flushing it, chances are there's a possibility of a flush and trough being in there as well. But that doesn't really compensate for being able to see one yourself. As I've said before, I've only ever seen two. I did try and get to one today, but I haven't had any luck with that one. And that's in the Poole swimming pool, which is the bit we're going to be seeing next. This is the dolphin swimming pool in Poole. Filmed these in 2011. I won't bother filming them again, but interesting. With handles in there, maybe it's a low level concealed. I feel some vibrating. I think if it's low levels, you can feel the handle vibrate. Film it again so that. Okay. Not working. Look at those ceiling tiles. But yeah, there's a concealed flushing trough in there. About 10 years ago nearly, came in there, I pulled the door open, it's straight ahead of me. There's the men's before they repainted the door, which you can see is grey. The ladies, concealed flushing trough, handle in the middle. Twyford's 1974. Wonder if I could get someone to open that for me. We will see. Probably not though. Right, that place we just looked at was the Dolphin Swimming Pool in Poole, which is now known as Everyone Active Leisure Centre in Poole. I did try and ask somebody at the reception if there was a caretaker around. There wasn't anyone. I wanted to try and get in the duct, obviously, to film the concealed flushing trough, but obviously wasn't happening. I did leave my number for them though, to say I'm working on the project, but obviously I couldn't get in there, so time to look at the next location. This building here, if you have a look at it from a distance, it's an old building in Bournemouth, which used to be the Peters Hill Fire Station in Winton. So Winton's another area of Bournemouth. If we look down there, that's Winton in that direction, down here. Whereas in that direction is more down. And here, of course, is the Peters Hill Fire Station, which also used to contain public toilets. And, well, they're still in there, but they've been closed since about 2007, which is unfortunate, really. What I'll do is I'll prop the camera up there. Now, of course, you might remember a few months ago I went to the Malvern Road, or I think it's Malvern Road Recreation Ground in Moordown, and it took me quite a few years to get in there. They are high-level Shires rubber wheels, slightly boxed in. And as I did mention at the time, it took me about almost 10 years to get into there. So I remember, I think 2004 was one of those times I came across them and they were closed for the day. I walked down the road into Winton and I came across this. So this building here, obviously it's been derelict, this part's been derelict for a long while. It was a fire station that moved out to Red Hill Park about 1960. Where they kept the toilets open up until 2007. Now I class that as the third year of discovery, because I found quite a few high levels. There were a couple of high levels in Bournemouth in 2002, quite a few more in 2003, so 2004 was the third year of discovery. Now I walked in here, this was the men's, and they had a stainless steel urinal up on that wall. The walls were painted white, which with cracks in the walls, well, cracks in the paint revealed these to be those brown glazed tiles. And there was two WCs, and as I walked in, I could see the side of a Flushing Trough. So I was like, okay, looks like I'm in luck on this one. And there was a third WC, which was well, it was kind of like a disabled, but not really kitted out very well. It didn't have a radar lock or anything, and it was a low-level white plastic system, which was possibly a Dudley. And I think that was built within the space of maybe 2 or 3 WCs, but the actual, well, the main WCs, they were fed by a Flushing Trough. So it was a very typical Flushing Trough. The chain went over the back, and it's quite high up because it's built on top of the partitions, possibly replaced earlier cisterns. Though I remember I gave it a little test run, and the chain was a bit small actually. It was kind of like, I think it was broken a little bit. And it had that squeak sound as well when I gave it its test flush. Obviously 2004, didn't film it, nobody was filming back then, so it closed in 2007. I was a little bit disappointed I haven't gotten there since. Apparently they are going to convert it into a cafe building, a trendy little cafe bar or something, but I don't know what's happening with it. I did ask the council to get permission in there, they wouldn't let me because of health and safety. And the new Red Hill Fire Station, which has been there since 1960, is just here near Red Hill Park. Walked past a few times, and I'm very sure that I've seen a Shires through the window, but that's quite a while ago. I don't think it's in there anymore. So that's the Red Hill Fire Station, Red Hill Park down here, and you see an empty space in a bit. Don't know if I've mentioned this before, but there used to be a block of public toilets here. The park opened about 1937. It was quite a sort of typical 1930s building. You can see where it was in the older imagery. And I filmed it, I think, in 2009. I came across this one in 2004 as well, actually. Maybe not the same day as when I discovered Red Hill. No, not the same day when I discovered Peters Hill, but different time. And the men's had one WC with a high-level Dudley, which was a black cistern, grey Dauntless grip, and a stainless steel pan. The urinals were these black coloured urinals, quite sort of largest individual ones with like speckles, like these sort of silverish speckles in them. They look like the type you get at nightclubs, not very good looking. They had quite a few of them in Bournemouth actually in the modern settings. Most of them are gone now. And there was a all-in-one Wallgate unit in what would have one time been another WC. Well, I walked past round by the ladies, which was this side. I saw through the open doorway they had white cisterns, probably Dudleys, all high levels, and I think they'd probably been refurbished maybe in the 70s or 80s or something. So it had that sort of slight feel to it. And then in 2007 they refurbished the ladies but not the men's, so I filmed them I think in 2009. But I lost the footage on my phone rather annoyingly, so I wasn't too happy about. And then 2010, sorry, they got burnt down, so I missed my chance to film them again, basically. They've got a new set in the park now. Trying to see if there's a picture of them. Yeah, this is what they look like, those Red Hill ones. We've got a new set in the park now, which are individual unisex ones. This was the men's. Obviously the window has been bricked in, but very typical 1930s. And completely gone now, thanks to those idiots burning them down. Bournemouth lost a high level, or at least it lost a high level from the men's. Well, look at Peters Hill in a minute. Yeah, so Bournemouth lost a high level in the men's now. They've got a unisex in the park, which I have seen, but I haven't bothered filming it. So type in have a look for the Peters Hill fire station very quickly. There's the fire station when it was the fire station. You've got the men's on that side, obviously. They had adverts up above. Not sure how old that picture is. There's a fire engine in it. The ladies, I'm very sure I took a sneaky look in there once. I think they got dauntlesses. So I think these were refurbished at different times. They obviously put the disabled in the men's at some point, taking out a few WCs, and then there was put a Flushing Trough high level. Well, obviously a Flushing Trough is a high level in the two main WCs, but not in the disabled. Obviously you get quite a lot of these questions when you check these places out, but obviously it's closed and obviously not going to reopen, unfortunately. So these are other locations I found Flushing Troughs, and quite interestingly, I actually quite a few years ago, I think maybe back in 2000 or 2001, I saw one somewhere in the New Forest, but I can't identify it. I don't know where the location is, but I did see one in the New Forest as well. So I can't think straight off how many I've seen in my life, but I've seen quite a few Flushing Troughs. Couple concealed, many exposed, different shapes and varieties and so on. So obviously I do enjoy seeing them when I see them. I'm not sure when I'll next find another one. Could be tomorrow, could be next year, I don't know yet, but obviously in a bit I will talk about the rest of the places coming towards the end of the year. But there's another final Flushing Trough we're going to have a look at, which is another concealed one, I believe, but this one's slightly different. The one we're going to look at now is going to be a low level one. Okay, and here's a picture of what I believe to be a low level concealed Flushing Trough, which is quite interesting. Considering it's concealed, I possibly won't get a chance to see them. Now this is taken from what appears to be, I'll try and find it, wherever I put it, a book on, well, it's an online document, Inclusive Urban Design Public Toilets. You flick through, eventually it will talk about, well, this picture comes up just talking about various setups. Now it's quite interesting, that document. I'll try and put a link for it in the description in a bit actually. But yeah, I've had a look through it, and it looks like it's a Flushing Trough concealed at low level. Now really, if it was exposed, you couldn't have a low level Flushing Trough, because you'd obviously have to build it within the wall would have to go all the way around it, so it couldn't really work if it was low level, but conceal it you can. And if we have a close look, you can see it looks like they're automated electronic sensor flushes or something. So in a lot of ways it's probably very different to the Flushing Troughs that we usually know, the standard high level one. This is clearly the men's, because as you can see up there you've got the urinal system going into the urinals, so on. Well, these are possibly the ladies. So yeah, it probably is a Flushing Trough made out of some material, possibly steel or aluminium, but obviously the insides might be completely different. It's got sensor flushes. You could have a Flushing Trough at low level with the handle going directly inside, but I'm not sure if it'd work too well. So they possibly do still make Flushing Troughs, but they're probably just for concealed, basically. They probably don't have the high level one available, which is a shame. So obviously throughout the tutorials we've basically been talking about sort of the Flushing Troughs, their background, with the very early source from about 1936, so we see there. Another very strongly 1930s one, to the typical, I'll say the standard, the most ordinary one here. And we've been talking about ones where the chain goes through the middle, i.e. in this one here, And we've been talking about concealed ones, the fact some are twisted pipes, some are longer than others, considering they serve more WCs than others, and sometimes the width between each cubicle length will be wider as well. And where it was concealed, it had a series of lead bars in order to make it work properly. So if anything, it was probably the only cistern that could adapt to the environment. So with a standard cistern, if we have a look, like a Dauntless cistern, or is this a Shire's or Dauntless rubber? Well, this one's from Shoreham Cemetery, is a standard single cistern. If it's twisted pipe, you move it here, and so on. If it's concealed, the chain will drop down into the handle, and so on. But these cisterns, basically, they don't adapt themselves, you adapt these. Whereas the Flushing Trough, it adapts itself to the environment. It's clever, it's smart. So that's what I quite like about these, but the very look of it, something I quite like. I used to like just the very look, the way it's clearly at high level. Pipe goes up into a cistern, and chain comes over the back, but I realised there's a lot more to these than I thought. So originally, the Shires were my favourite high level cistern, but quite a few years ago, more than 10 years ago, I switched to the Flushing Trough and never really gone back, because there was something about it, the very look of it. There was something very sort of different about the Flushing Trough, and I grew to like it more and more over the years. So this is my favourite cistern. Unfortunately, I've only actually filmed, well, in total I filmed 4. The 2 in Plymouth, remember there were 2 Flushing Troughs in Plymouth, 2 that served WCs each, and the 2 from my old middle school. I probably filmed quite a few concealeds without really knowing what's there. I'd like to film more. Obviously I've missed the chance of filming my old favourites because they're refurbished. With Portman Ravine, I did have my camera out and filmed the premises about 2005, but I didn't upload it to YouTube. I didn't film it and film the pan flushing, nothing. I'd done none of that. I just filmed the outside. Now I've actually got the phone where I think that footage was from. It's very old. Get it out quickly. Sony Ericsson. There, you can even see my reflection there. Yeah, the Sony Ericsson. I managed to get a lead to charge it. Should we have a look quickly? I've got the leads down there, but I need to get a lead to plug to the computer. I've had a look for the phone. It's not very clear. It's damaged a little bit. But the video I filmed of the Portman Ravine one, I couldn't actually find on there. So I don't know if I deleted it for whatever reason. I didn't need it on there. I wish I didn't delete it. But I might be able to extract deleted files from the phone. I'm not sure about that, so I'm going to work on that. But if I do find the video of this, I'll be very happy. But it's one of my unofficial videos in a way, because it wasn't intended to be put online. I also did I think a duct view as well, one of them. I put my hand through an air vent. That's all another story. But aside from that, I'd like to actually be able to go back and film this one properly, do a room shoot, a trough view from the inside, the outside each one. And I think this one was the odd way round actually. All the others, I think the chain was the wrong way round. All the others, the timer box was on this side, and then one of them it was the other way round. I can't remember which one it was. See, but yeah, there was something very good about that, and just the very look of it, you see, was something I liked. I like that look as well. So I would say if you do see a Flushing Trough, film it, because you won't get a chance to do so very often. If you see a concealed one, definitely film it, because you won't get a chance to do that very often either. Like I said, I'm not the only one who's filmed them. Quite a few other users have filmed them as well. Myself, Dauntless 486 has filmed one, Randomness has filmed one. Well, that was Wickstead Park actually, quite a few years ago, but that's a very good one. And somebody filmed one at Yeovil, I think that one's gone now. Somebody found one at the Yeovil car boot sale or something, but we found out that was been replaced, which is a shame. So yeah, hopefully if you go out filming, hopefully people will find them. There's a lot of people finding good toilets at the minute. A lot of high levels get uploaded. A couple of weeks ago, what was it? Was it nearly 9 days, 10 days a high level got uploaded? So quite a good record there. But the final part of the discussion, we'll have a look at places that I'm going to be visiting later in this year. Right, this one here, this place is in Studland in Dorset, near Swanage. I might be going there next week. I'm going to have a little car ride next week apparently. It's just been, well, it's not been formally arranged yet, but I've been given a choice of a few places locally. I started thinking through and I thought have a look online, and all of a sudden it appears that the Purbeck District Council don't maintain all their toilets, but they mention some that are available by town and parish councils. This is the Studland Parish Council, but I did read this one might not be there for much longer, or it's already closed, so I'm not sure yet, but I'm drawn to the area. I'd been through it on the bus, but I've not actually been to this bit. I didn't even know they were there, so again it was just a bit of quick research. They had some modern ones actually. Down there there's modern ones which I'll avoid. So that's one place in Studland. Now where was the other place I found in Studland? It was down here, was it? So this is quite it's a very tourist centred area, but it's not here. Wrong way. But yeah, I might be able to get a chance to go in next week. They've got potential, quite a few of them, from the outsides anyway. They had potential. It's all hidden by trees, and all of a sudden you get down to a beach, and here we are. But look at that, somebody's doing some work outside. I mean, I don't know if that's work to improve the roads, which I seriously hope it is. This building, glass bricks, again a bit like the Tinside Lido in Plymouth actually. Just scroll round the back. Don't look like they're doing renovations to the building, but it's a potential. As I often mention, I judge them very quickly. It's clearly got potential. And I might be going to Lulworth Cove. It's just an idea of mine. See if it happens, which hopefully it will do. Rural parts of Dorset. You see, Dorset's very much like Devon and Cornwall. Once you've gone past the Bournemouth and Poole area, it's mostly rural. I've seen these quite a few years ago in the past in Lulworth. I can't remember if they're high levels though. It's quite a long time I've been there. I'm very sure I'd remember if they were high levels, but I don't know if they've been refurbished. Because apparently people kept complaining about them. Thought they weren't good condition. They were right to me when I saw them, but Lulworth Cave, it's a very tourist centred area. Well, very rural area as well, but a lot of people around. There it is, typical rural Dorset design building. It's either Purbeck stone or Portland stone. Portland's I think the one they built Tower Bridge with in London, so it might be Purbeck stone. Makes sense. See, so that's a place we'll try and check out, and that's just an informal visit that might be happening in the next week. And of course at the end of the month I'll be going up to stay in Whitley Bay near Newcastle. Tyne and Wear, that's the name of the county, North East England. I'll be staying up here, so I'll be there Monday to Friday. I've completed an action plan for it. Maybe make a few last minute alterations, but if you've seen my past discussions and tutorials, you'd notice that I've done quite a few potentials in the whole area. Hopefully it's sunny up there. Looks sunny in these images. The imagery dates June 2012, well it's June 2014, sorry, so hopefully we get some good weather because I'll be out most of the day, constantly filming. Found quite a few potentials, and a lot of them are one after the other, while all the dull ones aren't actually that close. So, I mean, we've even got a cemetery en route. Go and have a look at a place called Blyth as well. And as for Newcastle itself, well, what can I say? I'm not going to give too much away, but I've seen a very strong potential in there. I'll try and get in there. And also the south of Tyneside as well, which I've obviously mentioned a few times. That underground one in Rocker, wherever Rocker's gone. I'll see it in a minute. I've done so much research on it. I should identify this area better now. Here we are. Are we right? No. So yeah, I enjoy my research. I haven't done any research this week though for anywhere. But obviously that's what's going to be happening. Oh, there's Rocker. It was actually Seaburn, I think, wasn't it? Right here. But yeah, so I'll be going up here at the end of the month. Very excited. Gone to the wrong place again, as usual. Looking for the underground ones. There they are. down there. So yeah, just a quick reminder, probably what will happen is when I get there they'll either be closed, or I'll get down there and it'll be stainless steel prisons or low level boxed in, or a 90s refurb or something. I don't know, I'll see when I get there. Looking forward to it though. So that's obviously one place. And of course there's a few other places I'll be visiting for the rest of the year as well, which I'd like to mention. Right, another place I'll be planning on going to is Hampton Court, which is, well, it was the royal residence before Buckingham Palace. Went there in '99 and they have mock Victorian high levels in there, which was quite a surprise at the time. Don't know if they're still there, but that's Hampton Court in London I'm trying to go to. And of course I researched the local area just for a little bit of extra fun. Came across potential here, no idea if it's actually going to be any good, but it looks alright from the outside, but as always looks deceiving. They plan to close these apparently in my research, but apparently they kept them open, but I'm a little bit worried about that. So it's probably going to be a no on that one, but it's not going to stop me from checking out, because some of those places are better than you think they are. So that's one place. In the summer I've got a few places, going to go to the Isle of Wight as well. Known high levels down, I think is it Shanklin or Ventnor? One of them, they've got known high levels, which I'll be checking out. I'm also going to try another Brighton area one, even though I've mostly finished with Brighton. There will be a special coming up relating to the best of Sussex, which I need to work on at some point. I'm also going to try Littlehampton again. Quite a few cemeteries in places, and also later in the year I'll be going back to Kent, which remember was quite successful last time. So I'll be staying in Ramsgate again. Try and do the places I missed, and a few other places in Kent, and also a bit of Manchester later in the year, which is up here, which should be interesting. Trying to look around a few places in the area, a few cemeteries. And they've got the John Reynolds Library I wouldn't mind seeing, and the City Hall. I'll do a reshoot of that. I lost the footage from when I'd done that a few years ago, and maybe something else as well. So quite a lot going on in the next few years, so whenever I see something good I'll upload it as soon as possible. So hopefully we'll have something pretty soon. Hopefully pretty soon we'll have something good to put up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the discussion now. I think it's gone on for long enough. I do enjoy these discussions when I put them together. We'll show my hometown for a bit. Yeah, I enjoy these discussions. Hopefully people don't get too bored of them in the end. Obviously I've got interesting stuff to say. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to ask, as I've got a few answers to questions. But aside from that, obviously I'll see you when I'm next online or something. There's supposed to be a thumbs up there. Yeah, so I'll be back online soon.